Giants fans have been waiting a long time for this. Top position player prospect Marco Luciano, 21 years old, a shortstop, huge power, has been promoted to the San Francisco Giants. And hey, they need his energy and his bat in the lineup right now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there and hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube. Swing for the fences on Sleeper Picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. And coming up on today's show, that's right, we're going to get into the Giants promoting top position player prospect Marco Luciano, whom MLB.com ranks as the 15th best prospect in all of baseball, with Kyle Harrison, by the way, ranking number 11 per MLB.com. There's not always consensus, and in fact, Fangraphs has been a little bit lower on Luciano recently, but I mean, he has turned his season around after a kind of difficult start to the year in Double-A. He was coming off a fractured back, or he had a broken bone in his back, and he's been hot. He's been red hot. He was just recently promoted to Triple-A, where he did well. He did well basically since June 10th. Let me give you the numbers for Marco Luciano, who is a shortstop. I think I already mentioned that. But since June 10th, he's had 140 plate appearances, most of which came in Double-A. He only has 27 plate appearances total in Triple-A after recently being promoted. But in his last 140 plate appearances, he's hit .305. He's got a .407 on base percentage and a .576 slugging. It's a 271 isolated power, which is really high. That's his number one best tool as an offensive player is power. And that overall line translates to a 159 weighted runs created plus, meaning he was about 59 or 60% above league average when he was on the field in Double-A and Triple-A. Also, you may have noticed a healthy gap between the average and the on base because his walk rate is a robust 15% over that span. The one thing I look at, and it's not great, is the strikeout rate is on the high side at 28.6% over that span. And if we look at overall in Double-A, strikeout rate was 29.8%, and overall in Triple-A, strikeout rate 29.6%. So he's going to be a guy who's going to strike out, is what it looks like to me, at least right now. And keep in mind, I don't know if I already said this, he's 21 years old. So the Giants suddenly have two 21-year-old legitimate prospects here in Luis Matos and Marco Luciano. And I just want to address, somebody just asked me on Twitter about Matos and how he hasn't really hit for power and he was expected to, and what gives, and does that mean Luciano also very well may not hit for much power? And my response to that is that Matos is not a guy who was expected to hit for much power. Matos's greatest attribute is his hit tool as opposed to the power tool. And for Luciano, it's kind of the opposite. The power is the standout tool for him offensively, and you hope that the hit tool is there enough. If you combine the best characteristics of Luciano with the best characteristics of Matos, that's kind of like the perfect archetype of a player. He also, by the way, has been known to or reported to have improved dramatically at the shortstop position. And so I've spent a lot of the last couple weeks talking about how the Giants don't have an answer at the shortstop position going into 2024, but you're going to get a look here, and the trade deadline is coming up. So in a minute, we'll discuss why the Giants made this move right now. But I do just want to read the prospect write-up from MLB.com on Luciano just to give you a better idea of what to expect. And so they say, quote, the top middle infielder available in the 2018 international class, Luciano has demonstrated electric power since signing for $2.6 million out of the Dominican Republic. Perennially one of the youngest players in his leagues, Luciano has looked raw at times against older pitching, but the only thing that really has slowed him was a back injury that limited him to 57 full season games in 2022. He still posted a 798 OPS with 10 homers as a 20-year-old in high A. Luciano's most notable asset is his lightning fast bat speed from the right side of the plate, which produces plus raw power to all fields. While he looks to do damage and can get overly aggressive, he does use the entire field and will accept walks when pitchers decline to challenge him. He'll always be a power over hit guy, but his natural ability and aptitude for making adjustments could mean that he's a 270 hitter with 35 homers per season. Though Luciano has a strong arm and a high baseball IQ, most scouts outside the organization believe he'll have to move off shortstop. He has fringy speed and range that are better suited for third base or right field, where he could be a solid defender. His offensive game will profile at any position, end quote. So that's a glowing review, especially when you consider the two things that they list as kind of weaknesses for him. Overly aggressive. He has addressed that. And the 15% walk rate over his last month and a half kind of demonstrates that. League average, I don't know about in AA and AAA, but it somewhat resembles the majors, is about half of that, maybe a little less than half of that. And also the other knock on him here saying they think he's going to have to move off shortstop. Well, reports are, like I said, that he has looked really good there at shortstop in, this season, basically. And so, yeah, we're going to find out. He's 21 years old. There is, expect possibly some struggles. In fact, maybe likely. I mean, even Luis Matos, with all that potential, he just hasn't quite been an impact player for the Giants yet, although he's held his own. And so I think we can hope that Luciano will at least hold his own. And there's the potential. I mean, what are they? 270 hitter with 35 homers. Imagine that. The Giants haven't had somebody hit 30 since Bonds in 07. And so, man, I mean, a 21-year-old with that kind of potential, it's an exciting day. And like I said, Giants fans have been waiting a long time for this. So why was now the time to make this move? We're going to get into the struggling offense, but also how the trade deadline factors into this momentarily. And before we do, this episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Do you want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Sleeper is now offering up to a 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and simply pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats, like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. Do you think Wilmer Flores or Marco Luciano or anyone else are going to homer? Smash more on homers. Do you think Ellie De La Cruz is going to steal another base? Head over to the Reds game and smash more on steals. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy. They also have safe and fast withdrawals. Use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details, currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. All right, as promised, why did the Giants make this move right now? Why was now the time to call up Marco Luciano? Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, oh yeah, we're going to be breaking down a big league debut with Marco Luciano in the lineup almost certainly. He will be in the lineup facing the Oakland A's. Giants play the A's tonight at that's the Red Sox game. At 6:45 Pacific, the Giants play the A's tonight. And you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So it's kind of obvious why the Giants made this move right now, in large part because their offense is absolutely struggling to a severe degree. They are lucky to have won this game. I mean, lucky maybe is not the right word, but they are fortunate to have won this game yesterday against the A's. Their offense since last Wednesday, which is when the losing streak started. I'm going to sort this on Fangraphs, and my goodness, they are last in the major leagues. This is a week, so obviously a small sample, but they're so far below the next team, it's unbelievable. In terms of wins above replacement, the Giants are last since last Wednesday, which was the first day of the losing streak, with -1 win above replacement. But what really stands out to me is the weighted runs created plus of the team. 39, which means they've been 61% below average. And the next closest team is the Phillies with a weighted runs created plus of 50. And so that's atrocious as well, but the Giants 11 percentage points worse than the next closest team offensively. And just to put it in simpler terms, their batting average is 154 over the last week, which ranks last. Next closest is the Phillies at 190. And the Giants' on-base percentage in that span is last at 229. Next closest team is at 251. That's the Royals. Giants' slugging percentage is last. They're last in all three. Average on-base slugging over the last week at 274 is their slugging. Strikeout rate is 29%, which is third highest in the National League and third highest overall over that span. They've simply looked atrocious, including in this win. And so in some ways, Marco Luciano is here because of his bat. He just had a game last night in Albuquerque where the altitude is really high. So offensive numbers, just like when you go to Coors as a major league team, you kind of have to consider the altitude when you're looking at offensive numbers. But Luciano, it wasn't just that he hit a homer last night and drew a walk. He hit the ball really hard 3 times. All 3 of his at-bats. He homered, I think it was over 110 miles an hour, and a ground out and a line out that were both also very hard hit, like 109-ish on those as well. And so Giants simply aren't getting that right now. Nobody in their lineup is really hitting the ball hard outside of Jock and Wilmer, I guess. But, Peterson isn't even playing against left-handed pitching. He was in the lineup last night, but just their offense has been really, really bad for the last week. And then specifically, I mean, honestly, they've been bad offensively for over a month. And so it's not just the last week. But then if you look at, Casey Schmidt and Brett Wisely, they just simply have struggled mightily overall. Casey Schmidt is 16th worst among all players in terms of wins above replacement at -0.8. And if we set the minimum to 120 plate appearances, both Schmidt and Wisely this season are in the bottom 10 in Major League Baseball in terms of weighted runs created plus. So they've been among the 10 worst hitters in baseball who have had at least 120 plate appearances. And that's a long list. I'm going to tell you how many hitters have 365 hitters have at least 120 plate appearances, and Schmidt is 10th worst with a 49 weighted runs created plus, and Wisely is 4th worst with a 37 weighted runs created plus. Only 3 hitters have been worse than Wisely, minimum 120 plate appearances. And obviously, Thairo Estrada is on the injured list, although we got an update finally yesterday on Estrada that was good in that he began hitting and taking ground balls yesterday. So that's a good sign, but he's still weeks away. I think at least a week and a half or so, probably 2 or more weeks away from returning. Brandon Crawford could return on Friday, But Brandon Crawford hasn't had a great season, and he didn't have a great season last year, and he's 36 years old. He's in the last year of his contract. And yeah, I mean, I think that getting a look at Marco Luciano now, especially with the trade deadline now less than a week away, it's next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, is important because if you're going to go out there and trade for a middle infielder, I must say there aren't a lot of great middle infield options. You're basically talking about Tim Anderson, who's actually also been really bad, Paul DeYoung, who's kind of just low upside but high floor, I guess. And I've talked about Tommy Edman, but that the cost to acquire him would be high. So getting a look at Marco Luciano to see, can he be part of the solution here at this position, is important going into the trade deadline. Like, they didn't have to do it, but if you think maybe he can take over a job there, then you might as well get a look at him with 5 games to go before the deadline. And if he just looks overwhelmed and is striking out 50% of the time, you may really feel like you have to make a move, even though Crawford and Estrada are getting closer to returning. There's also the theory that if you are trying to acquire a Shohei Ohtani or something, that perhaps having a player like Luciano showcase himself at the major league level, if he's going to be a centerpiece for a deal like that, could make some sense as well. I tend to think with the Angels continuing to play pretty well that they're not going to trade Shohei Ohtani. And so to me, honestly, in a way, that would be a good thing, because the Giants giving up a player like this or more even, whether it's Matos or Luciano or Harrison or some combination, perhaps, I think that would be an overpay, but that's a lot to give up for 2 months of a guy. And if the Angels just hold on to him, nobody else gets him either. And so the Angels not trading Ohtani isn't the worst thing in the world for the Giants, I don't think. But yeah, so Luciano, they need his bat in a way, but also just the energy you get from a top prospect making his debut. We saw in the earlier part of the season, even Casey Schmidt, who's gone on to really, really struggle offensively, when he came up, it provided such a boost for the team. And then also Patrick Bailey did the same thing. Luis Matos did the same thing. They went on a long winning streak. I think their 10-game winning streak started when Luis Matos debuted in St. Louis, or around then. They had won a couple, I think, already, and then 8 more after he debuted. And so anyway, I think that this is an offense in need of a jolt pretty significantly. It's been extensive. I mean, the overall season numbers now, the Giants offense has gone from above average overall to 3% below average, which is significant. I mean, they were relatively deep into the season and at least like 5% above average. So they have fallen off quite a bit. And now, thankfully, they've been a good defensive team and a good base running team, but overall, their wins above replacement per Fangraphs by their position players, it was top 10 at the deadline, and now they're 15th. And so they've been slipping, and they're in need of a jolt. And so whether it's the trade deadline, acquiring some talent, or Marco Luciano, it's time to find out what you have here and what you need to do by the deadline. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to discuss the Giants winning a game, eking out a win over the A's. It wasn't pretty, but at this stage of the season right now, a win is a win, and they will take it. So what's the latest there? Where are the Giants in the standings? All of that in just a minute. And before we get into it, all right, as promised, we're going to discuss this win. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the name Alex Cobb yet. He saved the Giants last night. I mean, the offense is such a story in how much they're struggling, but you don't win a game like that without the type of performance we saw from Alex Cobb, who was brilliant. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, everydayers. Tomorrow, we're going to be breaking down the big league debut of 21-year-old phenom Marco Luciano. Can he provide a spark? Can the Giants win another game? Finally getting a day off after the game. And so this is a huge one. You got one in the bank against the A's, and now you've got another huge one tonight because you want to cement your status as buyers and not potentially sellers or a stand pat kind of team ahead of the deadline. Giants play the A's tonight at 6:45 Pacific. You can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Ryan Walker, by the way, going to open for probably Alex Wood. Giants facing a lefty with an ERA over 6. The A's allow 6.1 runs per game, and this guy has a 6.1 ERA. So it's time to wake up the bats. But they weren't awake yesterday. The Giants were fortunate to eke out a win. As I said, Alex Cobb was brilliant. We've got a note here from Alex Pavlovich who says that Alex Cobb hasn't allowed a run at Oracle Park since May 16th, and he became the first pitcher in franchise history to allow 2 or fewer runs over a span of 6 consecutive home starts. And so that's kind of obscure in a way, but at the same time, Cobb has just been absolutely lights out at Oracle Park. It's kind of, I don't put too much stock into like, oh, he's better at night than he is in the day. You're just going to get some random variation sometimes that looks like something of significance, but it's not. Like, we could probably look at pitchers, in a baseball season and find guys who are like, for some odd reason, better on weekends than they are on weekdays. And it doesn't mean that it means anything. It just, that can happen when you have so much data bouncing around. It's some weird kind of little factoids like that. But there's no doubt Oracle Park is a good place to pitch. And Alex Cobb has been brilliant here. And they needed it in the worst way yesterday. It was not a pretty win. The offense really struggled against a team that gives up more runs than anybody. Pitchers with high ERAs were shutting down the Giants. Look, some of these guys, Ken Waldachuk came in. He's throwing upper 90s from the left side. It's not like this is, A-ball stuff here. This guy was the key piece, I think, in the trade that sent Frankie Montas to the Yankees, and that was a big move. Was it last year or 2 years? I think it was last year. So, yeah, but you got to take care of business, and at this stage, a win is a win, and the Giants badly needed a win to snap this 6-game losing streak, and they got it, and the Dodgers had a miracle comeback in the 9th inning, 4 runs to come back, and then won it in extras. So the Giants are still 4 games out of first place in the National League West. The Phillies won, the D-backs won, the Reds won, and so the Giants... The Marlins lost yesterday. They're currently winning today. They had an early game, but Giants are alone in a playoff spot. They're no longer like tied for. There was a 3-team tie there, but the Giants now have a half-game lead over a playoff spot up to the minute here, and so that's where things stand. And some other teams are still kind of lurking, like the Cubs and the Padres and the Mets, maybe to an extent. Those games are 5, 6, and 7. Those teams are 5, 6, and 7 games back, respectively, of the Giants. The Phillies are half game back, and the Marlins are 1 game back, but they're winning, like I said, today. So that would put them a half game back as well. So it's tight. And so these games are really important. You don't, if you just lose 4 of your next 5, that's going to make things a lot worse for you. And so taking care of business is huge. Fangraphs gives the Giants playoff odds right now of 59.5%. And so you want to keep it there or go higher over these next 5 games and make the front office believe this is a team worth adding to, because they are. I want them to be. And in this position, if you have 60% odds of making the playoffs, it's go for it time. And I hope they go for it. I think frontline starting pitching, middle infield depth, maybe not even depending on how Luciano performs, is going to be key. And then just getting guys healthy is going to be key. Mitch Haniger, he was a big part of their offseason, and he's done nothing. So, and he's been hurt, obviously, getting hit in the forearm by the pitch. But yeah, so this is a team that needs some work, but it's also a team that has potential, as we've seen throughout the season at various times. But these next several games are huge. And so take care of business tonight. Wake up the bats. Can Luciano, it's a good matchup for him. A lefty on the mound for the A's. Worst pitching staff in the league for the A's. Go get him, kid. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow, breaking down Luciano's Major League debut and the Giants' critical game here against the Oakland A's heading into an off day at home. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.